I want to talk to y'all about a concept, right? Now, this concept is what I call alpha pandering. Now, I'm not somebody who is exempt from alpha pandering. I'm not. But I do want to break down to y'all what it is. Now, I am not a traditionalist, right? I am not a traditionalist. Something to understand is this. If you are a person who has a semi-traditional mindset, or someone who values a nuclear home, or who values gender roles to some extent, like a man being a provider, or of having children that are by the same two parents, or whatever it is, there is some form of pandering that doesn't come from a place of weakness, but it comes from a perception pushed of strength. Right? Now, what is alpha pandering? Let's say a woman would prefer to be in a position where she has a man who is in a monogamous relationship, or with a man who is a protector, who is a provider, who wants those type of things, right? Now, keep in mind, I do have videos talking about many times women don't know what they want. Like, you will hear these women say they want $100,000 man and all this other type of stuff. Nothing wrong with that if you get it, but most men don't have that, especially in the black community. And most of these women aren't going to be alone, and most of them are going to have kids. And within that, most of the men they have kids with is not going to have that. So I'm not saying that this matters nor doesn't matter. I say if you're overly worried and focused and trying to judge yourself based off what women say they want, you've already disqualified yourself from being a leader. All right, already. But what alpha pandering is at times is to speak from a perspective of, oh, that man don't let you do this, he's weak, he's insecure. Oh, that man cares about your sexual past, your body count, or he cares what you do with your body. Oh, he's weak, he's insecure. Something to understand is this, right? When it comes to strength, when it comes to weakness, when it comes to standards, when it comes to security, that many people who reach a certain level of security are going to look at people with a lower level of security as being weak, and look at people who have a higher level of security as not having standards. Right? Like, I'm not going to bad talk a man who chooses the lifestyle of being a cuckold, because there's a certain level of anima development and anima integration a man has to have to be secure enough to value a woman above his ego, right? But we cannot separate ego completely from our lives. Each man's going to have a different standard. Well, I say there's tiers of standards based off of a man's scale of sexual jealousy, right? And we also have to understand that the way in which a man approaches dating and relationships is going to play a role in the way that he views a woman's experiences, her past, her lifestyle, and how much he is or he isn't going to judge her, right? So understand this, right? A man who either is done having children or doesn't want to have children is going to have a much different perspective at times of a woman's capacity or willingness to be sexually exclusive to him. Even if we're talking about a man who would be cool with being in an open relationship in some capacity, or some variation of a non-monogamous relationship, even that man is not going to be comfortable with his woman engaging in having raw sex with other men while they are actively trying to have a child, right? A man who doesn't believe in being married to a woman in the state, he's not going to care about that, right? A man who is never going to wait for sex. I'm one of those men. I'm not working for no pussy, right? A man who is not going to work for sex is not going to judge a woman as harshly for her sexual past, because when he interacts with women, the return on investment is going to be to which he's not going to look at himself or be in a position of worrying about looking at himself in a way of feeling as if he's getting the short end of the stick, because if he's not fucking this woman relatively quickly, he moves on. So a man who looks at another woman's sexual past, he's going to see him as weak. Because, man, why are you dealing with her in the first place? But when you're just talking to a woman, you're just going to say, oh, man, that's weak. He's judging you. He's not setting a judgment-free zone, right? That's alpha pandering, right? So understand that there's different levels of integration. There's different levels of development. There's different levels of how well your shadow is integrated with your sexual experiences, your sexual past, your sexual identity. There's different ways these things align, right? Like if you're a woman and ultimately your desire is to be in a monogamous relationship, then understand that when you have that mentality, right, that a man who's going to lead into wanting that type of dynamic up front typically is not going to want a woman who was just being promiscuous, right? A man who typically is going into a situation looking for a wife is typically not going to want a woman who's been out there running the streets. Now, there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions. But we need to understand what pandering is, alpha pandering, right? Because I'll say this, let's say we're talking about the concept of, let's say we're having a conversation about the concept of independent women, right? A sexual alpha male, right, understands that he doesn't have to be, transactional financially in any capacity to have sexual access to a woman. I don't have to do that, right? So rather than having something to say about a woman who prioritizes her career so much over having a family and of being a mother who is an active mother who's present rather than being someone who works a lot, he may be like, listen, I value the fact that you've gone to school and that you have a career and that you put your career first. Because one, I'm not going to give you all that much time to where if you're not at a career, I'm going to give you that level of time. But not only that, but you splitting these bills. For some minutes, even you're taking care of me. Not all, but that's how it can be. A man who's looking to be a provider for a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home mother, a woman who's overly focused on being financially independent, that may be something that is a turn-off for him because her focus is so much on her career and her ability to climb the social ladder that her mentality is going to be separate to a certain extent from how much energy she's willing to put towards being a woman of her family and a woman who has the time and energy and capacity to raise children or to invest in that man's program, to be on his program. Now, I'll say this, when it comes to the sexual sense or even the relationship sense to a certain extent, independent women who have a certain level of control and dominance in their everyday life, in my experience, tend to have a greater capacity of being submissive when they get off work. But that's because they've already established having that level of control in their everyday life. So when they get off of work, they want an opportunity to feel feminine. They want an opportunity to be submissive with the man. And, you know, understand that whole 50-50 argument and all that other shit, it doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of a woman dealing with the man she actually fucking likes. But keep in mind that alpha pandering is a real thing. It's a real thing. Right? So what areas does alpha pandering persist? For a man who knows he's going to slut this woman out, which I think is necessary, I think that's a good thing. I think if you have an inability to do that with the woman that you're with, to really take her to the depths and the dungeons of her sexuality, that's going to present issues, right? But are you waiting around to do that? Are you taking your time to get to know this woman first? Most men, if you're going to take your time and not rush towards sex and just get to know her, probably you're not going to want too much for her to be sleeping around and being promiscuous while you're waiting around while she's doing that. Right? You got to understand the concept of alpha pandering. And keep in mind that there's different levels of security. Right? Different levels of security. Right? Let's say a dude doesn't care what a woman does when he's not around at all. Like, he does not give a fuck about her sexual past, none of her experiences. How much is this woman really going to have to do to be in a position to be someone he commits to? If he believes in commitment at all. Right? Like, let's say a man doesn't care. Let's say a man ultimately would want to be in at least a primary partnership relationship, right? Let's say he knows that he has multiple women he's dealing with, and this particular woman, he would prefer her to have some beta male orbiters, or to weigh her options, right? Now, if she doesn't have the time to spend with him, or the effort or the interest in campaigning for that position, she will never be anything above a fuck buddy. Never. But he's not going to tell her that. He's just going to let her feel as if it's cool for her to move however she moves, and then simply to just choose whoever is applying the most pressure, who's putting in the most effort, who has the most aligned goals. So he probably doesn't mind her having, a bunch of beta male orbiters, a bunch of guys like that, because one, that's less energy she's going to require from him. Less energy she's going to need from him. She can get her cup filled having a bunch of beta male orbiters who are going to give her attention, right? Who's going to stroke her ego so that when it's time for her to go see the man, she's hot and ready. She's ready to go. Right? I do think that a certain level of alpha pandering at times comes from a sexually dominant man's mind, his paradigm, right? Like, I've been the guy where a woman might go out on a date with another man, then after the date come home and, come fuck with me, or, I might get the to-go plate, or a woman might be, talking to a guy who's trying to trick off on her, trying to spend some money on her, and I might benefit from it in some capacity. Not pimping. I've never been a pimp. There's qualifications for that, right? But I'm just saying that some dudes are going to simp. They're going to do all these different things because they value a woman, right? But then at the end of the day, the dude who they really feeling is oftentimes going to be the one who's benefiting from what's going on. Like, I done been in the car before with a woman, and let's say she's got a ticket or some bill that's pretty pricey, and we're driving them. Oh, damn, that's crazy, right? Dude's calling her up or texting her about, saying he's going to pay for this, he's going to pay for that, right? And while having that conversation, I'm about to go dig the guts out. She about to go pay for some shit for me, and I got my own money. I'm driving, chilling, mind my business. And she asked me, I'm thinking about, having sex with him, tricking off that pussy a little bit. I'm like, that's on you. Just think about that. But if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Keep in mind, the dude already gonna send the money, so that's just about how you feel like you want to do as a woman. That's your choice. But they never know if that would disqualify her from being a woman I'd be willing to take seriously in my own mind. She may never know. alpha pandering is one of those things where you gotta understand this, and I'm gonna put it like this: a woman who has attention whore or sex work propensities and tendencies, the only types of men she can deal with, right, are going to be men who have either a pimp mentality or a simp mentality. Now, you don't have to be a pimp to have a pimp mentality, right? Either a pimp mentality or a simp mentality. What does that mean? That means either he doesn't require you to show a certain level of respect towards him because he's just happy to deal with you at all and to be around. So, he hasn't reached a certain level of avoiding the devouring aspects of the chaos that's within feminine energy and female nature. He doesn't really have a capacity to do that, right? And then you also have the pimp mentality, right? Now, the simp may be someone who enjoys that devourers aspect, right? And he sees that animus, he sees that social programming, that he sees those things as something he just accepts. And like I said, I have more respect for cucks than simps, right? But then let's say we have a man with the pimp mentality, right? Now, a pimp mentality guy is going to say, well, I don't mind. Like, I don't care if you're showing your body off online and twerking on the internet and trying to make money off of your sexuality and doing these particular things that may otherwise make you unqualified to be, my wife. Although, on a other note, a lot of real pimps are going to be more inclined to marry their hoe, right? But with the pimp mentality, it's like saying, okay, cool, yeah, you could be on OnlyFans, but I'm not judging one for being on OnlyFans because if you on it and you my bitch, I'm benefiting from what you're doing, right? You get what I'm saying? That has nothing to do with whether or not he'd be willing to marry that woman or to take that woman seriously going into the future. He may say, okay, cool, that's just what we're doing right now. Another type of alpha pandering. Let's say a woman tells a man, I always wanted to get tossed. I always wanted to get a train ran on me. And let's say he's like, you know what? Hey, I got some homies. Let's go ahead and flip her, right? Let's flip her. She may not know that this has disqualified her from being this man's wife, right? Maybe she hasn't qualified herself yet, so it doesn't matter. But if ultimately she wanted something long term, wanting to engage in that particular type of activity may put herself in a position where the man says, you know what, hey, that's not the type of woman I want to be the mother of my children, right? She's not. I mean, for a lot of men, it works that way. Even if a man doesn't care about your body count, sometimes he may draw the line at, well, shit, she like to get flipped. She like to have a whole bunch of dudes run her down. So I do think it's important to understand, like, so oftentimes with the alpha pandering, sometimes people do a lot of things when it comes to trying to trigger the beta males or trigger the men who don't view themselves as sexually dominant when it comes to conversations, and then try to bring up a bunch of talking points about how a woman can get down. A lot of men who operate out of alpha pandering, they give women, not that women need to be given that, but they give women a lot of wiggle room and space to have a lack of integrity or character in the way that they interact with the men in their lives, the way that they treat people, right? Just accepting that as part of nature, letting a woman and giving her rope to hang herself, and pandering to giving her the freedom to feel justified in her bad behavior. Right? And that is subjective, but that subjectiveness is also going to be somewhat geared towards what she says to herself is the long-term outcome of what type of relationship she desires to engage in. If the type of relationship she desires to engage in going into the long-term future is one that includes the activities that she's partaking in, then it may not be one of being overstimulated. It may just be that's what type of person she is. But sometimes a woman is simply going through a stage of psychological reactance, right? Where she's put a lot of pressure on herself to fit this idea of a quote unquote good girl. And she wants to take a short little break from that identity that she's built for herself. Not to really integrate these things into her conscious mind, into the type of lifestyle that she wants to live, into the type of experiences that she truly wants to have going into the future, but just to take a little break. And this little break that she takes from this father complex, going into being overtaken by her sexual shadow, her primal instincts, this period of time can overstimulate her in a way to where a man who would actually be willing to take her seriously may not be able to measure up to the previous experiences that she's had. You know, we have to understand that there's a connection when it comes to the concept of the male ego, right? Superlatives of sexual experience, especially for a woman's ability to be vulnerable and intimacy, right? All of these things have a certain level of connection. Even for the guys who, for most guys who even would be cool with a non-monogamous relationship or wouldn't leave a woman just because she got some outside dick, even with some of those guys, the line would be crossed if she's having sex with, if she brings the baby home, or if she catches a sexually transmitted disease, or if she fucks his friends, his family members, his co-workers, or his enemies. That's ego too. No, that's the principle. It's about respect. To another man, if they get into that relationship and the context is monogamous, then doing anything outside of that is disrespect. And to another man, they could even have that understanding and be able to have a conversation with the woman if she breaks those confines, right? So we have to understand that there's different levels of security, and there are different mentalities and mindsets when it comes to dating and relationships. There are different levels of security, right? So let's understand what alpha pandering is. It's Coach Brody. I am out.